that Jesus had the 12 disciples around him. Like Jesus could have easily have done this all on his own. He was God, but he showed his fully human side, and that human side needed community.
Yo, what is going on, students? My name is Michael. I'm joined by Jamie to my right and Jay Swizzle to my left.
Let's go, Jay
and,
Swizzle.
man, we are continuing forward in this video series where we're talking kind of all about our personal connection with Jesus, as well as our connection with other people around us, and making sure that we're doing both of those things the right way, right? And so tonight we're kind of continuing on the same vein. Last video, if you haven't watched it yet, we talked through prayer. Like real quick, pause this one.
Yeah, go
if you
fast.
haven't watched it.
Yeah.
Jamie, is there a way to make a video pop up right here?
Yes.
So there's something will pop up right here.
And go and just click,
Click that,
video.
and then, but real talk, like that will help you kind of understand what we're talking about here, give you some more context. But tonight, we've got a really important topic. John, just kind of tell the people a little bit, what are we talking about? Why are we talking about this? And then we'll get into it.
Yeah, we're talking about community tonight and how important it is for us to have community. In the Bible, you'll see all throughout how there's been multiple people who needed people around them who were wise. You'll even read stories about people who had unwise people around them, and then they end up doing something ridiculous or foolish. And so you'll see that throughout the Bible. And so we want to talk about community and how important that is for us. Michael, you mentioned it before we started video, and that there's a statistic out there that says that
I mentioned a lot of things before we started videoing.
That's true.
Yeah.
You are the average of the 5 people that you hang around. So what we want to talk about is just making sure that we surround ourselves with people who are wise, maybe people who are older than us, who know a couple of things, people who are younger than us, who we can kind of look through and see like, oh man, you're doing this wrong. Let me help you out. And that way we all help each other in our own community. So that's pretty much the premise of this episode.
Yeah, and then I think the main thing too is helping just everybody realize that the community you choose matters, right? The people that we surround ourselves with will greatly impact our lives, either positively or negatively. And so the point of this video is to help you realize, like, man, we're allowed to be choosy with our community.
Yeah.
In fact, I almost think that the Bible would, in certain areas, would command us and call us to be choosy with our community.
I almost think it dictates it.
Yeah,
Right.
Talking about community, I think about Jesus. He was very picky on who he was around.
Yeah.
You look at it, and I mean, you're like, oh, but he ate with sinners and tax collectors, and he was a man of the people. But then when you think about who was he really around, it was the 12 disciples.
Right.
And then who was he really around? It was the 3 disciples, Peter, James, and John. And so I think when we're talking about community, oh man, I think the Bible dictates very clearly that we should be kind of choosy on who we spend significant amounts of time with. Not that we should stop being around other people, but man, we should be very, very intentional about who is pouring into us and who can give us advice and whose advice are we taking. Like, we should be very choosy. So I'm so glad, man, when you mentioned that we were going to talk about community, I was like, yes.
Yeah.
Because so many people need to hear this.
Yeah.
We do. And so I think the first thing I want to just kind of make sure we understand tonight is the why. Right? Anytime we talk about something, we got to know the why. And so, like, as I was thinking through this, I'm like, man, why do we need community in our lives? 3 main things kind of jumped out to me. The first one is just companionship.
Yeah.
Right? Friendship. Like, if you're thinking to yourself, I don't need friends, you are lying to yourself.
Yeah.
Or like, maybe people have hurt you so bad that you're just not ready to do that. But like, we do need companions in our lives. If we've gotten used to doing life without companions or with the wrong companions, that can be a problem. That's a main reason. We also need it for accountability's sake. Like, it's really important that we have community in our lives so that we can stay on the right track. You know, like right now I'm in the process of trying to force myself to become a runner, okay? I hate running. I hate it so much, okay?
Yikes.
And I'm not very good at it. I'm not very fast. And it's been really hard trying to do it by myself. And I've realized that by trusting some friends with some of my goals and looking at their progress and seeing what they're doing, it's allowed me to stay on the right track and do what I need to be doing rather than going in the wrong direction. The third thing is, what about like workmanship? The things we're doing in our lives, the things we're trying to pursue. Like, man, good or bad community can make or break those things. But as far as the why, when you guys read those three things, like, what do you think about that? What's really important for you? Like, what's your why behind community?
Yeah, I think, I mean, Michael kind of touched on it, but I want to read this verse. It's Genesis chapter 2, verse 18. So God created man, and Adam was by himself working, and then he looked and said, the Lord God said, verse 18, then the Lord God said, like God said, it is not good that the man should be alone. That right there instantly makes me think, well, hey, you can't do this by yourself. You're not meant to be a lone wolf. If we were meant to be by ourselves, then God would have just left it with Adam and not with anyone else. It would have just been there. I think about like Galatians 6 when it talks about we are to bear one another's burdens or carry one another's burdens. And so why do we need community? Well, God created community. Like from the jump, God created it. Yeah. And then I think about it in the sense of when things are going bad, like we need people to come around us. We need that friendship. Like I've heard a song that was like, you want to go fast and do it by yourself. Yeah. But if you want to have a good time, you're going to bring the homies with you. And so I think about that. And
Not what I thought you were going to say. I love that.
I think about that. That's an Andy Mineo song, by the way. But that's not the exact lyrics. I don't remember the exact lyrics of it. But I think about that, and I think about the companionship aspect. Everything in my life, like if I do things by myself, I'm so efficient. I can be so efficient. Yeah. But man, I'm not having fun. Yep. But like I remember like in college writing a 10-page paper, staying up till 4 a.m. with me and the homies. And we're staying up, we're making that cookout trip, and what should have took 2 hours to write took 15 hours. And man, we had a blast doing it. Yeah. I think about accountability. Like my life, I would not be here if it wasn't for some guys that look at me every week and's like, how are you doing? Yeah. Are you actively seeking Jesus? Like what are you doing? And then I think about just the work ethic. Like, again, sometimes you want to have fun and so you get those people around, but sometimes you're in a busy season. You just need to grind. And nothing gets me going faster at work than being around other people who are just going at it. Yeah. When you're around someone and you look at them and it's like, wow, they are actively going. They are working hard. That just makes you start working hard. And so I think all of this is so important because it's such integral to who we are and how we're created. We're created for relationship. We're created to be around people and to be with people, whether you're introverted or extroverted or you're a introverted extrovert or an extroverted introvert, you know, however you are wired to be around people. You are wired to have people come alongside you in different areas. And so, man, I think about it. It's so important. But I'd love to hear from you, John. What do you think about just the idea of needing community?
Yeah. I think it's a cool concept that God created for us, right? Like, imagine like just trying to build a home by yourself. like that would be terrible. Like
I couldn't build a home if there was 100 Amish people with me, though. To be honest,
that's fair.
But you're right though.
But like, imagine how much more fun it would be if 3 of us were together building a house. We would have no idea what we're doing, but we'd have fun doing it.
We'd get a roof up.
We would get. I don't know about a roof.
Oh, we'd get a roof up, dude.
You think so?
The 3 of us, we'd get a roof. We could build a home together. Forget what I just said about 100 Amish. We could build a home together.
Drop it in the chat if you want to see us build a home.
We'll bully a GoFundMe.
Anyway, but yeah, so like, I think it's important because you mentioned it, Jamie, like, or Michael, that Jesus had the 12 disciples around him. Like, Jesus could have easily have done this all on his own. He was God. Yeah. But he showed his fully human side, and that human side needed community, and he needed those 12 disciples around him. He needed that community in order to build the church and to build the Christianity. So I think that's a beautiful thing. And then accountability, like for me, that's the biggest thing is if I was left to my own vices, man, like there'd be, like it wouldn't be good.
It'd be a lot of vices.
It wouldn't be good. Yep. But with a good, strong community, with good, strong people around me, they can help me keep me accountable, and I can help them keep them accountable. Yep. Not in a way to put each other down, but to build each other up. to be better for Jesus and to work towards that sanctification process in our salvation. So, yeah, I mean, that's some of the reasons why I need community. Some of the reasons why we in general need community as well.
Yeah. Man, Jamie, you know, to the song lyric you shared, the real quote to that is if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Right. Now that's not a biblical phrase by any means, and you could take that and say it's not right. But what that's saying is, you know, when you don't have people alongside of you in your life, you are prone to be lonelier, weaker. You're going to wander towards things that are going to distract you from where you need to be going. And so, like, real talk, like, it's really important that if we have this goal in our lives, like, if you're watching, you know, you might be like, well, I want to grow in my walk with Jesus. I want to know more about him. I want to become more godly. I want to, you know, be a better Christ follower. Well, the people you allow in your life will help dictate that, right? The people will either take you towards that goal or they'll take you further from it. And if you're alone, you're just going to probably stay where you're at.
Yeah.
And maybe even go backwards.
Yeah.
And so it's important. We know it's important. That's the why. And so one thing is, like, what are the types of community that we have available to us? Because I think this is where it gets tricky. You know, if we're saying, all right, well, I want to grow my walk with Jesus, but man, I've already got my community established. Well, what if those two things don't line up, right? I think that might be the case for some of you watching. You're like, hey, I've already got community, so check. Now, how do I grow in my walk with Jesus?
Yeah.
But I need us, I think all of us, to take a pause and a step back to say, all right, I have pre-existing community, but is that the community that I need to be leaning into? Like, are these the people I need to have in my lives?
Right.
As I was researching for this episode, I stumbled upon a couple interesting articles, and they were kind of talking about the various forms of community that we naturally have in our lives. And I want to kind of focus in on the primary communities and secondary communities in our lives. So primary community, if you're like, what is that? That's like family, friends, people who have the same interests and hobbies as you, you know, maybe teammates. Those are people that you want to be around for the most part. Like, those are groups in your life that you hold close, that you allow to speak into you. And then there's secondary communities, right? These are maybe your classmates or your coworkers or your neighbors, or, you know, maybe the B tier sports team you signed up for with all the kids that you don't really know or want to hang out with, right? Like your second sport, I don't know.
JV squad.
It's the JV squad, right? You know, no offense, but, you know, there's primary communities and secondary communities. And I think where we go wrong is when we begin to pretend like we don't have any control over our community. Yeah. And I think where we really get into trouble is when we allow our secondary communities to become our primary communities, right? When you are a new person every single school year because you're with new classmates and new faces, and you moved neighborhoods, so now all of a sudden you're a totally different person because you have different neighbors around you. And I'm not saying that maybe there's some people in your current primary community, your family or friends, that maybe don't need to be there, but what I'm saying is that it's important you realize that your primary community needs to be the people who are going to point you closer in your walk with Jesus. So, man, what has been some of your experience with that? Like, have you found that to be true? What do you think about the idea of primary and secondary? What you got on that? How can we help the students understand that they have a say in their community?
Yeah, I think for me, like you said it best, like sometimes you have to take a step back and look at the community that you're in, because sometimes you can realize, like, man, like I'm more stressed, or I'm just bogged down, I'm tired, I'm just so, like, out of my mind, and I just don't feel connected to God. Sometimes you do have to pause, and like we said in week 1, take a step back and pray, and pray to God, and to look at the people that you're hanging around. For me, like, the longest time, I would put my sports community above my church community, or the people that drew me closer to God. And in that sense, I just became more stressed. I became more distant from God. Did things my way. Did things, well, these guys are going to play on this day, so I'm going to go instead of going to church, or something like that, and let that take priority. So one thing you got to look out for community is what they put priorities over. So if they put anything over God, red flag. not even a beige flag, like a red flag,
flag.
red flag. Like let's check that real quick.
Yeah.
Not saying that it's wrong, but just I am saying it's wrong. Red flag, red flag. Just make sure your communities are putting God first. Another thing too is like, I'm gonna admit it. I'm a huge 21 Pilots fan. Okay, I'm a huge
Amen,
21 Pilots
dude.
fan.
Let's
Okay?
go.
I'll admit it. I'll put it out there on the internet for everybody to know.
I only
okay?
like their album. I think it's Vessel. It's the one with
Yeah.
the two old men.
Hey,
Yeah.
That's the
on
best
cover.
album.
it's a good
We'll
one.
talk. We'll
It's a
talk.
good one.
Never
It's a
mind. We'll
really
talk.
good one.
But for a while, like I got so obsessed with it, and I actually got into a community of other people who really like 21 Pilots as well. And
Nerd.
I still, I know, right? Yeah.
That's too far.
I still, but yeah, man, like we would chat it up, and there was a lot of things about this band that I won't get into that we would talk about and like just share our like love for this music. But the thing that got in the way was God wasn't in the center of all that. Like God wasn't the priority in that. So I had to check that and be like, you know what? Like I love the band and I'll still listen to their music, but I'm not going to put that before God. Like I'm not going to, put God second to that. So just checking those communities that you have.
Yeah, I think, I mean, something similar, not music related, but like video games.
Yeah,
I don't know if y'all were gamers.
absolutely.
Still gamers.
I wish, man.
I wish
Not
I was still a
anymore,
gamer.
yeah.
I played video games all the time growing up. It was like, I called it my stress reliever, but I feel like I was more stressed when I was playing.
100%.
But I was like Call of Duty guy, hardcore.
Yeah.
And then I started playing a game. This is nerd alert. I used to play a game called League of Legends. Have you ever heard of it? Nerd alert. Let me tell you. And I
It's
own
way
that
worse than 21
nerdiness.
Pilots.
Yeah.
Yeah. No wonder. And I would play, and I got to the point where I wasn't hanging out with my friends. I wasn't hanging out with people that I was close to. I was a Christian at this point, and I was ignoring going to things around other believers or around other people because my buddies just logged in and we're about to go hop in a ranked game and we're going to go, and
Play
I
6
got to the point where,
hours.
6 hours later, we're still grinding. And, Jesus hadn't been talked about once, but a whole bunch of choice 4-letter words have been.
Yeah.
And I know in my heart, that's not good community. I know in my heart, that's not building me up. That's not making me better. And so just in those moments, I was like, okay, wait a minute. And so I like the idea of taking the step back. It's almost, there's a phrase, you can't see the forest because you're looking at the tree. Like you might be standing here and you're like, I don't see how my community is making me different because you're wrapped up in the middle of it. Take a step back and look and say, how does everyone else view the people that I'm around? How does everyone else, is everyone else looking at me like, wow, they're all really good young men serving Jesus? Or is the general consensus, wow, these are some hooligans.
Yeah.
These are some heathens.
Yeah.
And then you step back, and when you finally look and you see the forest instead of the trees, you can start to realize, wait a minute, maybe this isn't the community that I should be with, or maybe this isn't the people that I should be spending all my time with. Not that we talked about Jesus, not that Jesus stopped being around people, but he didn't spend all his time with those people. He spent all his time with the ones that were building him up, that could pour into him, that he was pouring into. Is similar with us. There's a good principle when you read the Bible. If Jesus did something, you should be doing it too.
Yeah.
Just very easy principle to follow. If you don't, I don't know what to do. If Jesus did it, you should do it. And if Jesus, he was hanging out with other people, but all his time was spent with people that were building him up.
Yeah.
When he was with those negative influences, guess who was with them? The 12.
Disciples, yeah.
When he was out there away from them, guess who was with them? The 12. And so I think about that, and I'm like, man, what would happen if we stepped back and we stopped looking at the tree of our community and started looking at the forest of, is this community actually helping?
Man.
Is our friends helping? Is the people that we're spending all of our time with, all of our texts, y'all don't text, all of y'all Snapchats, are they building us up? And if the answer is no, maybe you need to start reevaluating who you're hanging out with. Not that you cut them off completely, but maybe you start figuring out, okay, I need to start digging in some community that's elsewhere that's going to be more beneficial, that's going to help me. So, man, I think about that. I'm like, wow, what would happen if we stepped back and saw how our community really is?
And I think this is one of those things that really hits deep. This is, we talked about prayer last week. Prayer is one of those things where you can do by yourself, and it doesn't have to mess your life up in some ways. You know, I feel like when you're really thinking about community, and if you're really deciding that, man, you might need to make some changes, that can mess your life up in some ways. And I remember when I got saved and gave my life to Jesus, I know, Jamie, you have a similar story in some ways. I began to look at some of the people in my life, and it wasn't a lot of people, but there was people, and I said, all right, like, hey, we might still be able to be friends, but man, I can't go to you for advice anymore. Or I can't vent to you about this anymore, or I can't ask you for tips on conflict I'm dealing with, right? Like, because they were not gonna point me towards Jesus. They were gonna rile me up and get me fired up to seek revenge, or, you know, like, hey, bump him, man. Like, we don't need him anymore, you know, like, whatever.
Go get your money.
Get that paper, boy. You know, no, I'm just kidding.
Get that paper.
But you know, real talk, like, it was just very important that I realized that in my life, and so I had to begin to make some changes. And so what we're saying, if you're watching this and you're maybe trying to figure this out for yourself, like, yeah, it's gonna take some honest reflection. Like, you are really gonna have to look around at your life and at your community and say, if growing in my relationship with God is really this important to me, then I got to trim some people out, man. And I've got to find some people who can take their spot, who have the same goal of growing towards Jesus as I do.
Right.
And if you're watching this video, and maybe you are plugged in to Revo students, that's where I'd suggest you start looking. Right. If you're like, I don't know who to, hey, like, you know, we've got 3 campuses that meet. There are people your age who you could dip into and have good community with. Maybe you're not a part of the student ministry. Maybe you're like, I don't know what a Revo student is. I saw this video. It was shared to me with a friend. Whatever the reason might be that you're watching, like, realize that, hey, the people around you, they matter. Like, our community matters. And so, real quick, like, before we're done here, we have all since kind of transformed our communities. Like, we follow Jesus and we understand who we need in our lives. And so I'd like it if we could each just take a minute. We'll start with John to just share, what does your community in your life right now look like? And how could you encourage students to try to find something similar?
So my community, like, it's a hodgepodge of family and friends, and mainly friends from church. I mean, the more I come to church, the more friends I make, and the more like-minded they think, and the more they want to get better, and the more I want to get better, and the more that we want to, you know, strive to do better for Jesus. And I mean, like, that's awesome. So, like, that's really been my community is the church family. But that's not to say that I don't have a secondary community. Like, my secondary community is my work family. And right now, like, we're going through a season where there's some believers there, and we get to talk about Jesus, and it's getting to that point where, you know, I'm speaking up for Jesus, and other people are like, hey, do you like Jesus too? Like,
Are you on the team?
I thought, you know, that was, you know,
Spider-Man meme.
You know, we're all pointing at each other. And but we're finding that there's people around us that also love Jesus, and so, like, I'm finding that community as well at work. And again, that's not to say that if you like sports or if you like music or League of Legends or 21 Pilots or whatever, like just disown those people. But make sure that you're keeping it in check, putting God in the middle of it. And, like, for me, like, a lot of times now I'll put the music and be like, okay, like, what does this say about God? Is it even talking about God? And if it's not, then okay, like, let's back away from it. Anyway, so find a community that puts God first, whether it's in sports, music, video games, whatever, and build on that, trust on God. So
cool. What you got, Jamie?
No, I think that's good. I'm not #nerd anymore. We can keep that.
That's good.
But no, I would say my community is very similar. My community is very shaped by by my church family, by the people that I'm around. More specifically, I thought about like there's two very distinct areas that I get most of my community. One of them is our group. As a church, we have our groups. Our groups are like the small group ministries that meet all across the church, all across the area. And me and my wife, we host our group. And so we have about 10 people that come into our house on a Thursday evening, and we come and what we get to do is we get to talk about life. We get to share wins, losses, and we get to talk about Jesus and what he's doing in our life. And so that's been such an encouraging time for me to be able to do that. And then the other big area that I'm getting in my community is from like I run the student ministry at our North Campus, and I get community from like our student volunteers. We are a pretty tight knit group where we know each other, we care about each other, we love each other, we pray for each other, and we're pushing each other even outside of just student ministry. Coincidentally, a couple of them are part of our group, so that's just added fun. Get to see them 2 times instead of just once. 3 if we're at church on Sunday together, so it's cool that way. But man, talking about community, before we pass off to Michael to hear his, we're talking about the importance of it. I used to work at Lowe's Foods. I've shared this story before, but I worked in the produce section, and when we would order bananas, there's different ways you could order them. We'd always order them completely green, which if you don't know, a green banana is unripe. We would order them completely green, and then every night the closing person in produce would put one banana that was ripe, almost rotten, into a box of green bananas. And the next day, that box of green bananas was no longer green. They were turning yellow because they were getting ripe. Because scientifically, scientifically, the bananas, as they ripen, are releasing a chemical that causes other bananas to start ripening. And so we would always order green because they last longer. You drop the ripe banana in the green box of bananas, get ripe bananas. The same is true with our life students. When we have people in our life that are the ripe bananas, they are going to change us. We are the sum of the 5 people that we are around. And so they are going to change us. And so your community matters. My community is very heavily shaped by the people that I interact with at church. It's very heavily shaped by the people that I believe if I have a problem that I can go to them, and they're not just going to look at me and be like, man, you need to do this instead of that. They're going to look at me and be like, all right, this is what Jesus tells us. Yeah. This is what the Bible says. And so that's where I'm getting my community. But Michael, what about you?
No, dude, that's good. I think a good host, it's knowing when to not speak and let that speak. That banana thing is spot on, man. So I don't have anything really to share that you guys haven't already shared. What I will say is this: something I found with my community is really just understanding it doesn't have to be a lot of people. It doesn't have to be 10 people or 15 people. Right. I think maturing in life is realizing that, actually even sometimes the smaller group is more beneficial. And so like all it takes is one, I never knew that. All it takes is one ripe banana to affect the other bananas around us. Well, is it rotten?
I mean, it was ripe. It was as ripe as we could get it.
It's prime ripeness, John. All it takes is a ripe banana and it's just crazy. It just takes one, right? And I think the same is true in your life, man. You might be like, Michael, I have a community of 10 people right now, but they're taking me in the wrong direction. At church, it might look like I only have 2 people to choose from. Well, I'd say that's probably better. It's probably better to choose the few who are going to lead you in the right direction than the majority who's going to lead you in the wrong direction. And so we're going to just close with that. For you guys who are listening, realize that, man, we are here for you in this struggle. I know what it can be like to have to rehaul your community, figure out what needs to be changed and altered. But really know this, that at the end of the day, you will only ever regret when your community takes you in the wrong direction. You will never regret it when it takes you in the right direction. That's good. That's good stuff. And so if you're trying to figure out, man, how do I grow closer to God? Your community plays a massive, massive role in that. Guys, thanks for watching. I know we joke about it, but genuinely, like, we do encourage you. Share it with somebody. Maybe there's somebody around you who they're struggling with this. Maybe you're trying to recruit them into your community, right? Share this with them. It's like share this with a friend without saying anything, right? Maybe they'll be like, oh, are we vibing on community right now? I don't know. But hey, and then also I'd say this, you can follow us on Instagram and TikTok as well. It's just at revo.students. We post clips of some of the stuff that we post. We post early access and maybe some bloopers and stuff like that along the way. There will definitely be some bloopers from the beginning of this episode shared. So definitely check that out. But hey guys, like, your community matters. Who you choose to be around you matters. And it's going to make all the difference when trying to grow closer to Jesus. So with that being said, John, would you outro us?
Don't be a bad apple. I mean banana.
Later. Oh, man.